So this presentation is really about these two, well, one's a book, one's a report, but I wrote a report with my team wrote a report with the Australian Sports Commission in 2022 called The Future of Australian Sport, and it outlined the mega trends that are going to affect sport over the next 10 years. And mega trends are those trends which happen almost side by side to the industry, target industry, because we can't extrapolate out past about 5 years in a lot of fields. So we have to actually look at the adjacent trends to work out what's going to be happening in those areas. So that's what we did with the Australian Sports Commission. But I also wrote a book in 2022 called Building an Innovation Hotspot, which Tim Kelly stumbled upon in the Australian National Library. And since then, I've been doing these talks on merging these two because they are very related. So in the book, Building an Innovation Hotspot, I go through the different approaches that governments take. And I used to be an innovation officer in the state government here in Queensland. And we used to come to work and work out how do we encourage innovation here. And there are all these different approaches when you boil them down. And I went over to America and studied at the Smithsonian on they'd just done an exhibition highlighting or profiling 6 areas of innovation or innovation hotspots. And they were areas which were patenting and generating knowledge products at a much faster rate than the surrounding areas or America in general. So there were 6 basic approaches which governments took. One was a place-led approach, and that's what we all know about in terms of precincts, bringing everything together in one place and hoping there are spillovers and knowledge spillovers. And they work in varying degrees, depending on what they are, who's in it, how they operate, how it's curated. There are then culture-led approaches, and there are a lot of the people environment improvements like downtown renovations, bike paths, active travel. Places like Chicago really regenerated their economy almost by regenerating their cultural institution and their bike paths and their green spaces. So there are culture-led approaches. There are skills-led approaches, which is where the universities play a very central role, particularly if they partner with industry and offer those kind of pathways into industry. And then there are mission-led approaches, which are very in vogue at the moment. And that's where you have a mission and you bring together partners underneath it. And one of the more successful ones was when the Centre for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovations developed a COVID vaccine within 12 months. And that was bringing together industry, private, philanthropy, governments from across the world to share resources and platforms to develop those COVID vaccines and test them. And then there are R&D-led and finance-led approaches, and that's merely, or not merely, but singly increasing the R&D level. And there's a lot of calls on the Australian government to get up beyond the OECD average at the moment to an R&D level of 3% of GDP. And then finally, there are the technology-led approaches, which I feel are the best or the most successful in terms of what I studied at the Smithsonian, in that they take the technology, like radio communications, and then they look at all the applications for that, and they make it happen, often through government procurement. And when you look at the innovation hotspots in the US, a lot of them around where there's big government spending on those technologies themselves. And Silicon Valley is a perfect example of that. That was built around naval bases. It started off with radio telecommunications, and the Navy driving development of that in partnership with the private sector. And then it moved into computing because the silicon chips were part of that evolution. And then the private sector took on a lot of those patented technologies and have created its own global hotspot, which attracts the most R&D in the world. So there are all these different approaches to creating an innovation hotspot. In the Sports Megatrends report, we identified 6 megatrends which were significantly different from the previous report, and we did a report in 2013 and this one in 2022-23 was a 10-year follow-up. So we looked at if we got the first one right, and we more or less did. So we're hoping that this second one is right. And it shows, and I'd encourage you to go onto Clearinghouse of Sport and download this report, because there's a lot more in there than what I can get through today. But just quickly, there's New Horizons. It's all about high performance sport and the individualisation that's happening in that, an athlete-centred approach. It's all about the virtual worlds which are accompanying that. It's all about the, the material sciences that are going into that, and it's all about the ethics. It has to develop alongside of that. The next arena is the rise of where we're now looking at sport and playing sport, and in there is esports and exergaming. There's also the rise of streaming services. So in 2021, streaming services for the first time overtook free-to-air services as where we watch sport, and there are new sports-based streaming services, and that's significant because that channels a lot of the funding into certain areas of sport. And there's also a trend in outdoors sport. So we're going to surfing and rock climbing and national parks and green spaces to conduct sport. Mind the Gap is about all the barriers which exclude some groups from sport. So there's a cultural gap, there's an abilities gap, there's a generation gap, which people are very concerned about, because younger people on screens are losing physical literacy. They're not developing in the same way in coordination and muscular strength and bone strength as what previous generations were. Our Best Sporting side is about making sport safe, sustainable and inclusive in terms of our behaviours in sport. And the perfect pivot is about the new era of uncertainty that we're heading into with climate change, with geopolitical tensions, with epidemics and infectious disease control. And, the perfect example there is what happened with the Tokyo Olympics. Sport is very event-based. Sport is very, if something goes wrong in the day, it's disastrous. So there has to be a lot more expenditure on insurance, on pivots, on cybersecurity, like the cost of sport because of the uncertainty has gone up. And finally, there's escalate the exercise, and I call this my mega trend, because this is about people exercising for health and functionality, but it translating into broader participation. And it's the trends about the ageing population, it's the trend about convenience sports. Like, I'm a park runner, I do it because I don't have to sign up to anything, I do it because it's on everywhere and I don't have to go if I don't want to. But it's all about being convenient and non-committal. So it's about translating also some of that rise in participation. And I see this in parkrun. People take their kids and their kids then become really good at it. And then those kids go on and play sport, or they're far more interested in sport in school. So it's about translating some of those trends into whatever we're planning for the future, because this is basically a planning document. So we've got, and everyone said this before today, we've got this incredible opportunity here in Brisbane, and using the Olympics and the Paralympics as a driver for sport technology development, because winning at these events isn't just about the talent, it is about the technology that goes into the talent. And it's about using the technology to actually protect people in those sports against injury and to find peak performance and to actually identify people in the first place. So there's a lot of technology, and if you look at who's winning at these big games, it's the countries which don't just have the most people, but they have the best technology to curate those people, and that's where Australia has led in these sorts of arenas in the past. And what we can see is that the cost of the Olympics is rising, and people are questioning, we were the only bidder for the 2032 Games. And that has two messages to me. One is that there's a lot of opportunity for people to develop technology to bring down the cost, but B, it's all about legacy now. We have to justify that spending in creating things which are going to last beyond 2 weeks. So all of the infrastructure, all of the technology, all of the changes that has to bring about is about the legacy. It's not just about the 2 weeks or 4 weeks, of games with the Olympics and the Paralympics. So, and this is very, very conservative. The estimated expenditure is 5.2 billion. But there's massive opportunity there to feed that into materials science, AI and simulation for sport. And we've already talked about this morning the synthetic data sets that go along with a lot of sports to maintain privacy, but it's the digital twins, it's the virtual gaming, it's the strategizing in virtual worlds before you go onto the fields. It's translating exogamers into real gamers or, you know, in real life people. Get out of your avatar. It's the pathways into sport and identifying. And I think there's a massive opportunity to go out from the capital cities where all the sports infrastructure is into the regional areas and set up virtual gaming participation. And there's a lot of people who train from Bermuda and have won gold medals by training on Peloton and other instruments like that. So to me, it's a massive opportunity to use technology to increase participation in the pathways in. Obviously, there's health and medicine spin-outs, there's crowd security and crowd engagement, particularly cybersecurity. Like if you're about to start the 100 metres final and the lights go out, that's a massive issue. So cybersecurity is going to be huge. Communications and broadcast ticketing, you know, Ticketet's gone blockchain now. I know there's companies like there's a Sydney company about Foya, Sports Foya, which has put it on a blockchain. Smart stadiums, wherever that's going to be. But, you know, there's an opportunity to build the best stadium that includes a lot of technology. And there's also transport, housing, sustainable technologies, because one of the things is about a sustainable green games and creative and cultural arts and sciences. So there's a lot of opportunity with these games to drive science, to drive data analytics, and to drive these partnerships. So, you know, bringing all those trends and all those opportunities together, what my book basically says is that we've got to take a comprehensive approach. We can't just take one approach. We have to do skills and finance and technology and place. We have to bring it together and not just be siloed into one area of development to create an innovation hotspot. So in the book, basically, you know, these were the underlying, you know, take-home messages. Go digital and go global. So everything that's being developed in Brisbane today doesn't just have to be for the Brisbane market or even the Australian market, it's the global market. And, you know, often those networked open innovation models like the platform that we heard about earlier, fantastic. You know, that we need a lot more of that. Go with your strengths and look to the future. So if Queensland has strengths in data analytics and digital humans and other things, you know, that's possibly what we should go with because we've already got that advantage. Grow your own and go organic. Now, that seems weird with technology, but it's about people. It's about not necessarily importing things in, but actually nurturing the talent now. And we've got 10 years or 8 years for, you know, to actually bring those teams together and nurture them. And the people who are going to be ready for the 2032 games are going to be the people in high school now. So, you know, there's a opportunity to invest and bring people into teams and really build it here and attract key people. So build industries to modernising government. So that's all that service work, but also through the universities and stadiums and infrastructure. And this is a really key one here, and it's already happening, and which is why I think this is such a great case study, is that triple helix model of industry, research and government, because all of those areas, you know, are vague in terms of their funding models. So government might change government and the funding drops off. Research might have a few years where they're not funded at the same degree, and business goes through business cycles. But if you bring them all together, they create a far more resilient, you know, network to lean upon in the lean areas in one or other of those strands. And the final one is, you know, a lot of science is about experimentation and play and doing it wrong. And I think that's where virtual worlds come in, because, you know, virtual worlds are very fun. And you can create those places to play, and that brings in new people. So you don't just think of, you know, people behind computers like battery hens. what you think about is people playing games and having a lot of fun and being the in crowd. So, you know, it's about adding purpose to that work. And the other thing is expect it to take time. Like, it doesn't often happen in the cycle of one government. It takes 10 or so years, often 20 years, to actually build a sustainable hotspot with regional branding in this area. So they were my take-home messages from the book, but you can apply it to what's being built here at AusiSTARS and what's being done in Australia in terms of sports technology. And as I said, I think it's already kind of happening, and this would be a fantastic case study. So thank you very much.